Hello and welcome to the India Hangout. Can India replicate the success it shows in repeated space missions elsewhere is the question we're asking today, just after the PSLV or the Polar Satellite Launch Vehicle completes yet another successful mission carrying 5 satellites into space at a cost which apparently is less than that of making the Hollywood film Gravity. That was $100 million. This is not the first time India has done a no-frills launch. It also sent a mission to Mars, which is also on a quote-unquote no-frills carrier. The big question, like I said, is how can we replicate this elsewhere, and where can we replicate it, and how? And not a question that's not been asked before, but it's always merits revisiting. I'm joined by Kiran Karnik, former president Nasscom, also was with ISRO for about 20 years up till 91 before he moved on to the private sector. Also joining me, columnist and author Shankkar Aiyar from Mumbai. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. Mr. Karnik, very good afternoon to you. Let me begin with you, and we've got some questions coming in as well. Mr. Karnik, let me ask you the first question. As you look at this launch, and we've seen a fair amount of successful launches of late, what does this tell you about what we want to do as a country and where we stand today, very specifically in terms of what we want to achieve?
With two parts to it, Govind, if I may. First, of course, is that in the space arena itself, it indicates that we have built up over many years and hard work tremendous capabilities at very little cost, and that these capabilities are focused on doing things which are useful for the country. The broader issue, which you touched on briefly when you started, is, of course, where these lessons can be applied and what are the lessons. And I think there are many there that can be learned and can be taken across sectors, because these are mainly to do with the way things operate, how organizations are set up, the motivation, the management, the structures. And I think there are areas there which we can certainly replicate across the board.
Okay, Shankkar, let me get you in for a quick overview before we come back to Mr. Karnik. Shankkar, what's your sense? I mean, you've been writing about some of the challenges that this particular government faces. A lot of it, as you've also pointed out, is to do with execution and is to do with better resource management rather than anything else. Should we start drawing links between the two, or is it too early?
Actually, these links need to be drawn because the success of ISRO represents our ability to do innovation on frugal funding. The challenges of India are located in scale and require technology. And we are resource starved, even as we talk about us as a $2 trillion economy. So how do we make things happen is essentially how we organize ourselves. And the success of ISRO gives us many lessons on how we can be globally competitive in delivering technology. And a very interesting thing that Prime Minister Modi today mentioned is sort of being the satellite and GIS provider for the entire neighborhood. Well, I would like him to start with looking at India's geography, the GIS contours, on essentially two things: fishing and on water. We have the largest coastline. We are blessed to be a peninsula, but our fishermen can be better informed. There is a pilot project in Gujarat where the satellite imaging provides the fishermen exact or approximate location of schools of fish. And this is a service you can launch all over India. At the very least, it will end the problem of fishermen being caught by Sri Lankan naval forces or Pakistani forces. So we can operate. And there are many such instances in which I think India can succeed.
Mr. Karnik, let me come back to you. I think the question, even as we ask on what from ISRO we can learn, is it also the case that a lot of ISRO's successes are in a way residing in islands and can perhaps never be replicated?
No, Govind, I don't agree with that at all for two reasons. One, as I said at the outset, and we might come back to that later, that many of these successes, in fact, I would say a majority of them, are based on how you organize yourself and what are the systems and procedures you put in place to achieve a given goal, whatever that goal is. But also, it's important to recognize the space program is not an island in itself. It's been able to draw from Indian industry. In fact, a great deal of the hardware, the components that go into all the systems, including in the satellite launch vehicle itself and in the satellite, come from different industries in the country, some small-scale industries and some very large ones, sophisticated ones. So it is a whole network that has been created that has taken the whole technological capabilities of ISRO into the much broader industrial arena. Now, how we tap into that, how we use it, whether we do, what Prime Minister Modi mentioned and Shankkar just alluded to, whether we go into the global game in a big way, not in the small way we are today in the space arena itself, and how we can tap these capabilities to get to, high precision, high quality manufacturing, huge value-added manufacturing as opposed to low-end, low-margin manufacturing. I think these are both challenges but huge opportunities which we have not yet quite got into, be it for various kind of spin-offs, or it is for very large and important strategic sectors like defense, where we go on importing things when capabilities in terms of basic building blocks are available in the country.
A comment from someone here, Mr. Karnik, and I'll just read that out and then come to my question. The comment is, both steps by Prime Minister, moral boost for scientists, and now with FDI in defense likely, I think what he's suggesting is that the opportunities therefore increase, and which obviously goes to your point as well. So the question, Mr. Karnik, is, if we know that, and we've known for so many decades that we've had these capabilities, as you mentioned, in terms of organization, process, and putting together projects like this, why have we not been able to replicate it elsewhere? And what is the sort of fatal flaw that prevents us from doing it in other places?
Well, I would say that one of the things is that too many people, and I don't just mean the political leadership, too many other people tend to look at this as some esoteric technological activity on the fringe of what is mainstream India. And you see that time and again, if you look even at the kind of way political parties look at science and technology as a whole, barring one party, the others hardly had a mention of S&T in their manifestos. And it's so important for this country to be able to be technologically there, to apply technology, not for technological purposes, but for everything else. And I think that awareness is low. That's the first barrier. The second one is that much of this thrives partly on what I said, which is a perception that this is somewhat different kind of activity, and therefore, very frankly and directly put, the political interference is minimal to non-existent. And that's an important lesson to learn, that if you want things to work well, you've got to give it to professionals, give them a goal, give them a target, let them achieve it. We've seen that not just in space, we've seen that in, for example, if I take an example very close to where I am just now, the Delhi Metro, you can see that happening there too, where there's no political interference. You get a good professional, they build a good team, set up a good organization, and they deliver. So I think there's a lesson there too, which we need to look at. And then, of course, there are more detailed managerial structural lessons which I mentioned, which are separate, and we can look at them in detail.
Right. So, we seem to be in this whole mode as a country today of saying, okay, we need to get back on a growth path. We've got so many pending issues, particularly when it comes to physical infrastructure and, of course, social infrastructure as well. Is there a way successes like this can be used to motivate, either in real terms or purely in emotional terms, what we want to do elsewhere in the country? Or again, it comes back to my earlier question, do these tend to sort of be like, trees falling in a forest?
I think there's a huge opportunity, Govind, and maybe it's the right time to begin to tap it now. And possibly, your question is, I think, very pertinent, but maybe the time was not right a decade ago. Maybe it's right now, the time is ripe. The country is waiting for both change and for faster movement, and the government seems open to new ideas, and technology wants to prove that it's doing things. So maybe the climate was not right earlier, maybe the ambience was not right, now it's there, and I don't think we have any excuses to say why we can't use best practices and best examples from one sector in many others. Now, you can't just transfer it. It's not a question of transplanting something from ISRO somewhere else. But as I said earlier, the lessons and basic things can well be taken and adapted and used in many, many areas, including, as you said, in the social sphere.
Mr. Karnik, Shankkar used the reference of frugal engineering. Now, is frugal engineering, again, this is not a new subject and not the first time we are visiting it, but is that something that's a good example even today to set out on the objectives we want to achieve, or is it a substitute for doing something that we can't do otherwise? I'm
a little hesitant with that term, Govind. I know that those who use it with knowledge understand what it means. But too often it can begin to mean that frugal engineering is a sort of make do, as you say, jugaad. Jugaad is good, it's innovation in a way, but it's also just improvisation. Whereas here we are looking at things which are basic and substantial. It is new things altogether. So I understand what you're saying, and yes, frugal engineering in terms of how do you use your resources maximally. I think Shankkar mentioned that earlier very rightly. But if by frugal engineering people begin to move, mean that you sort of do make-do solutions that are so-called old days intermediate technology, then I don't think that's the way to go. Our problems require the latest and best technology because the problems are huge, and we've got to do it in a way which, as has been shown elsewhere, really optimized. And all you've got to look at is things like, if you take from different sectors, Devi Shetty and what he's done in medical care. And I think the example after example where some of these lessons have intentionally or unintentionally been applied, but on a limited and small scale, without being make-do. They're really something innovative and different, but substantial.
Shankkar, what's your sense? I mean, do you see a congruence between the achievements that we've seen in the space department, and it's not, of course, confined to this government or the previous one. These have been going on for many years, and the kind of tasks that we have ahead of us as an economy today?
Well, the launch of a satellite, is all about timing and all about force and momentum. So I said, I think we are in that place in history where there is a recognition that you can't go on with band-aid and jugaad ideas and run a nation of this size. So the two things that have been missing in the play is setting of goals and very visible leadership that is required. I mean, one can go on and on about the number of examples in which this can be done. But here's an opportunity for us, whether it is education, medical care, whether it is last mile connectivity, whether it is broadband, whether it's delivery of services. In all of these issues, I think there is a great deal to be gained by deploying what we do best. And when I say frugal engineering, I mean specifically intelligent solutions. I mean, the Prime Minister, it took the Prime Minister to actually underline the fact that the Mars project costs India less than the budget of the movie Gravity. I mean, these are things that need to be said and repeated so that you inculcate the idea of pride in your own abilities. I don't want to make it like, a very hardcore nationalism, but as people, you need to have pride in your abilities, and these are the things you need to project. I mean, so when you have a leader who has some sense of pride, you actually get to know things that can be done. See, last few days back, there have been 2 railway accidents in Bihar where security, fish plates, all was an issue. So here's, a simple solution. We've got these things up in the sky, and you could sort of locate particular areas where you received warnings about Maoism, or if you received terror threats, or if it is about the monsoon, or it is about the tsunami, or it is about missing people. All of this can be utilized. All it requires is for the political leadership to tell the bureaucracy, we want this A, B, C, D, E, F done.
Mr. Karnik, let me come back to you, and a couple of comments here. The first is that my sense is, like Mr. Karnik says, Rajashri, my sense is, like Mr. Karnik said, maybe it's the lack of understanding of science and technology, which is why they give it no importance, and hence professionals could work without interference. There's another comment which says, ISRO's success has been largely its ability to remain isolated from the rest of political interference in Delhi. They work quietly in Bangalore and close by. And finally, there's a comment which says, space discovery cannot be frugal engineering. So, Mr. Karnik, let me come to once again the present and future, as it were. If you were to look at some of the key economic challenges facing us, one of them clearly is execution. I think there is no shortage of ideas, there is no shortage of money as such, we clearly seem to face an execution problem, and that could be linked to many other things, as has been pointed out. But if we were to say that it's the same people who send up rockets into space, who launch satellites, and who could also be doing other things, how would you transfer these skills or these abilities if one could do it?
Well, Govind, I'm a little hesitant to talk of the same people because they are very, very capable, but I'm not sure it necessarily needs the same people. I think it's the similar, not same, but similar systems, processes, and organizations that work. And there are two important parts, one of which you mentioned in passing, and this is, I think, quite serious, so you might take it as half facetious. I think one of the reasons for the success of the whole space program is that it is not in Delhi. So you're, far removed from the politics of the capital, and that doubtless that helps. But the second thing, which is very important, it's an underlying theme, and for this, all credit to politicians from various political parties who have been in power over the last few decades. That is a matter of trust. In a program like space, you have failures, and you know you will have failures, and yet you can't run such a program by somebody saying, why did that rocket fall into the sea, and who is responsible for causing a loss to the national exchequer? That kind of thing doesn't work. So it's a broader sense where you permit people to innovate, understanding that they've done it with all the hard work, testing, simulation, peer reviews possible. And the probability of success is extremely high, but there is a realistic probability of failure, and you're willing to back these people and the innovations when that happens. But that's an important part of implementation, because one is just routine implementation of things which you can do efficiently, but it also requires you to innovate on how you implement and what you do. And there, you've got to be prepared for some degree of failure without trying to, get on a witch hunt and hang somebody, which means basic trust. Yes, of course, integrity, honest people, transparent mechanisms, but also trust. And I think that's something which, over the years, our system has lost. We just distrust every organization, every person, everything. And that's not a way to really get implementation done efficiently, properly, and with innovation.
Right. So I think, Mr. Karnik, you've raised some very fundamental issues here. I mean, the soft side, or so-called soft side, but which actually perhaps is the harder side. And I think I remember the former president Abdul Kalam saying that how when he was heading a space program, when he made a mistake, his boss took the responsibility, and when he succeeded, his boss gave him the credit. I don't recall who he was referring to specifically in that statement, but basically there was a sense of complete ownership and trust that he received, and which he could pass on in that system at least, and that perhaps we've not been able to replicate elsewhere. What are the other such lessons that one can take away from this, Mr. Karnik, which we can all in some ways apply in our own lives as we pursue our various objectives?
I think two other things which are critical. One is a clear definition of the mission. And ISRO has always been a mission-oriented organization, as we like to fashion ourselves, which means you have a very clearly defined goal and you're getting to that. So you know what your goal is. It's not some woolly, fuzzy, vague thing. It's very clear. And the second is to set up dedicated teams with clear timelines, budgets, responsibilities, and accountability. And this is part of the internal structuring I talked of, which, as I said, can be carried across sectors, that you define a clear goal, set up a leader and a team, and leadership, and Shankkar mentioned this is very important, you set that up, and then give them the resources that you think they need and that are fair, and hold them accountable with transparency and leave them free to deliver.
Right. So, Shankkar, is this something that is always going to be a challenge in our economy or in our country when it comes to getting things off the ground at the scale that we would like to do it?
Well, if you look back in history, it has always been a challenge to organize society, and that's how we passed from monarchy to autocracy to democracy, and what looks like the battle between merit and equality. So, but it's always a challenge to bring people onto the table, onto a common agenda, and get them to buy in something. So this is a bit of a mix of chemistry and biology in that sense, not so much management science. If you bring people together, you can do things. And I dare say that in the idea of the unique identity, India has done that and shown that. I mean, Nandan Nilekani put together a team, and we've registered 600 million people biometrically in a task that has not been done ever before anywhere in the world. Now, it's another matter that the entire program is politicized, but that success cannot be taken away. Neither can you take away the success of telecom companies who have reached the last mile of the consumer. I mean, can you imagine 10 years back talking to someone and saying that we will put together 900, we will have over 900 million telecom subscribers. So we have done this, and the issue really comes back to the political leadership on what they want done. And the number 1, 2, 3 issues in India are really about education, health, and safety. And I think all these 3 issues need to cut into similar issues of scale and technology. And when I say that we must involve ISRO, I don't want to drag them down to the managing of schools and stuff. They have a hardware capability that needs to be linked with software abilities, that of the IAS officers and of all the people. I mean, one straight off the cuff idea that I could talk about is that citizens' grievance issues, you know, those are issues that require scale, again, technology, prevention of corruption. All these issues are possible to be done if we, again, build a platform for that and instill some pride in that platform. I think we have done this in the past. We've done this in Green Revolution. We've done this when we created the national grid for the milk revolution. So I am confident that given the right setting of goals and the right leadership, these things can be done.
Right, Shankkar, we are coming to the end of the program. Let me come back to you, Mr. Karnik. I think we talked about some of the hard factors and some of the soft factors. Between the two, what would you lay greater emphasis on? If you recall, the question that we started out asking was, can India replicate this success elsewhere, and how, if so?
You know, I think the soft factors there are more important. It's leadership, motivation, structuring and organizing, how you lead people and trust people to deliver. To me, those are the ones that, if you want to take the lessons across a broader arena of different sectors, those are the ones that are going to be transferable and the ones that are more important.
Okay, Shankkar, last word.
I think it's the question that you ask, can it be replicated? Yes, it has been done in the past and it can be done in the future, provided we set the goals and make it provide visible leadership. That is really the critical issue. We need to build champions for the causes that we pursue.
Very much, gentlemen. We've completely run out of time. Yes, the answer is it can be replicated. The success of whether it's frugal missions or scientifically evolved missions like the ones ISRO has led all these years, but the big challenges, of course, are both hard and soft. One is the technology, but more importantly are the hard or soft people issues that matter when it comes to executing projects on ground. Thank you very much for joining us on the India Hangout. We're going to be back tomorrow, same time. Thanks for watching.